MLB, and that leads into Christa Carone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of
I
course.
always love when UFC is the lead-in to Christa Carone. You don't get that too often.
Well, I am grateful that you're here, and I know everybody else is too. We have an amazing turnout, which, again, I'm so grateful people keep coming back. Again, I'll just boast before. We had Jana Rich, and she gave me a great testimonial that said, in a world of Zoom fatigue and so many webinars that you can't keep track of, Zeitgeist Culture Class is the most inspirational and fun. So I hope I'm offering that. So Christa, you're here to participate in the fun, because this is fun. It's tough times, especially in your business, which we want to hear about.
Yeah.
Because you are in the live events business, in sports and entertainment, and also other types of live events. So before we move forward, pre-corona, what did you do and what did your company do?
Sure. So I am now realizing that we were in the business of social gathering, which is very difficult to do when we're in an environment of social distancing. But CSM is a sports and marketing firm. The core of our being is that we connect brands with experiences and try to align fans' purposes with brands' character attributes and brands' purposes as well. So it is kind of celebrating that sense of community between fans and audiences and brands. So we do everything from representing sports properties and bringing in sponsorships for them, to representing brands and helping them to identify which partnerships that they should align with, to producing and executing massive events all around the world.
Wow. So what would be an example of some of your clients and what you did with them?
Sure. So Women's Tennis Association is a client of ours, LPGA, Cirque du Soleil. Those are properties or rights owners who we represent, and we bring sponsors to them. New York Roadrunners would be in that list, the American Kennel Club. So those are our actual rights holders who are looking for the right partners to help execute or to help activate their brands. And then we would work with the likes of Citi, who is trying to identify the right properties that they should align with. So we would help Citi develop their broader partnership strategy, connected them with the Olympic movement.
Wow.
Citi does a lot with the Paralympics. And then we do massive amount of events all around the world, whether it's working with Ferrari's Formula One team, to even smaller New York City events, working with the media company, the Dodo, and helping them produce the best dog day ever, to working with all of the different sports properties and helping them bring brands into the fan experiences. World Wrestling Entertainment, doing their fan festival. I could go on and on.
So basically everything that is on hold right now.
The common denominator is it is a lot around this whole notion of IRL, in-person social gathering, which a couple of months ago, and I think even going forward, it's just something that we all love and need as human beings. And a little bit of the backstory is I actually just joined CSM in January, and prior to that had been running a digital media company. And one of the reasons that I made the shift from digital to more of a live in-person experience is because I saw how much brands were craving the opportunity to connect more with people in real life, because things were so crowded in the digital world.
Totally.
So I had been spending my career in digital and thought, oh, no. I think, we're seeing this tide shift to the importance of building community again. So not the best timing. I did not see this pandemic.
I pushed back because I pushed back because they
or the best
you.
Timing.
No, they need you now. They need your innovative brain. No.
That's right. So now I'm doing a pivot to digital.
Okay, explain what that means.
Well, right. So now you have everybody who was involved in planning some kind of physical event, or really in the mindset of social gathering, and this proverbial pivot world that we all love when there's a time of change, is everyone is saying, okay, pivot my experience from physical to virtual. And what does that mean? And so that's why we're all experiencing a lot of Zoom exhaustion, because in pretty much every situation, where there was some type of physical gathering, brands, property owners, whether it's athletes or entertainers, everybody wants to keep their brand relevant during these really challenging times.
You have to
And
be you have to be part of the conversation, whether you feel like you should sell or not, or
exactly.
in existence.
Right.
Well,
So,
ESPN did a great thing with the Michael Jordan documentary, right? Like that
amazing.
was interesting.
You know, 6.5 million viewers, and we're all craving some type of new content. It's appointment viewing. When's the last time, other than you know, some of the HBO series where we actually have appointment viewing that is less about the binge time.
Right.
So,
Just to clarify, for those of you not in the media business, appointment viewing was like the water cooler culture. Everybody's going to watch Dynasty at 9 p.m.
yes.
And there's no, you know, paper, what was it called?
On demand.
On demand.
Right.
Exactly.
It's actually
Or
kind of
binging.
lovely for those of us who grew up with that type of way that we managed our life. There is something a little bit lovely about saying, okay, remember 9 o'clock Sunday night, we're going to sit down and watch The Last Dance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some interesting silver linings in all of this, I think, as we all become even more glued to our screens, but looking for those ways to connect with brands or experiences that cut through the clutter of the Zoom exhaustion that we have.
So what is an example of a brand? You don't have to name names or anything like that. Maybe the type of business that they are. What are they doing to stay relevant or part of the conversation right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're all seeing a ton of these examples, and you've shared a few. I like some of what I'm seeing with athletes who are maybe before were a little bit resident to provide a bit of the behind the scenes of their lives. And they're now bringing you into, here's what their training routine is. Like, you're actually in the gym with them, and you can join them for a workout, or what it's like to handle homeschooling. Like, some professional athletes are saying, this is how I'm dealing with homeschooling. And so I think some of what you're seeing with the way that brands are personifying their purposes through the lens of their spokespeople has been interesting for a lot of us. That's a lot of what we deal with as a brand, going, okay, I was an MLB sponsor. How can I activate that sponsorship when Major League Baseball isn't playing right now? And so we kind of look at, oh gosh, we need to get really creative in what the sponsorable assets or inventory are. And in some cases, it may be working more directly with the athletes or working more directly with the mascots, you know, just ways that you can bring those personalities back into people's lives in unexpected ways.
Or make those masks, which I showed too, right?
Yeah, I know. I think we're all going to have mask exhaustion as well.
So I don't know if you believe in my theory of the second act, right? And like you know, we're in terms of our road back to the new normalcy, which I don't know, I don't love that term, or the new anxiety, or let's just say back to going beyond our stay-at-home culture, right? And we know a lot of places around the world have opened up for business. And last week I showed many examples of how people all over the world are going back into real life space. So what are some of the conversations you've been having with your peers in your business of what an event would or could look like? And the second part of the question, is there great debate and nobody really knows?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that we're about to watch and see how well they perform in this new era, if you will, and especially relative to sports. We know that sports is going to come back in more of a no fan scenario, and then may dial up a bit to be low fans before we get to a place where it's all fans. So NASCAR in particular,
again? No fans,
no fans, low fans, like a light amount of fans, and then all fans. And we're able to watch what's happening in South Korea as they've started to bring baseball back, and Taiwan in particular. Like, we're learning a lot about how sports is gradually coming back in other countries. But in the US, keep an eye on NASCAR.
NASCAR is going to
NASCAR is going to be running their first race this weekend. It's no fans, but they obviously are going to be testing a number of very, very detailed protocols and practices. Each team is limited to 20 people. That includes their pit crew. You know, there's obviously a whole testing scenario that everybody is going to have to participate in prior to the event. We saw this with UFC. I think that UFC put on a successful event. Now, it's only been a couple of days. We have to see, has there been any outbreaks from the people who participated in the UFC event? Knock on wood, no. And we've seen how UFC has been able to produce a live event that obviously had a lot of interest. I think they had about 750,000 paid viewers. So outside of the metro New York area or outside of bigger cities where this just feels like, oh my God, we're in the epicenter of everything, watch what's happening in the other communities and with some of these other sports, because we're all going to learn a lot from that, and we're going to be able, it's going to influence how we develop further protocols down the road. PGA comes back live in a couple of weeks. The first PGA tournament will be in Fort Worth, Texas. They just delivered like a 37-page memo to all of their players on every single aspect of tournament play, from their transportation getting there to the driving range to how to interact with your caddy. Like, really very, very thoughtful, disciplined approach to every single literal and practical touch point. So hats off to everybody. Like, this requires a tremendous amount of creativity and ingenuity, and we're going to learn as we go here.
Okay.
And PGA in particular will be no fans, but potentially that's a sport that could gradually bring back fans as well.
And do you think if we don't have a rise in contagion in this country, that the NFL is definitely going to start in September and MLB in August? Like, are they already convinced that this is going to happen?
I think that there are a lot of motivating reasons and obviously financial reasons for the broadcast networks, for the players, for the team owners, and really for all of us as fans, that you will see live sports come back in some fashion. MLB, as we all know, announced some new thoughts, ideas for a season that can resume and brought that over to their players this week. I thought a lot of innovation that went into that thinking, and we'll see how that all plays out. But there are too many stakeholders with a tremendous amount of vested interest, from sponsors to owners to players to fans. We're a pretty smart society. We should be able to figure out a way to do this in a safe, in safe and effective ways for everyone.
But there's no doubt that if we're going to start with, you say low capacity?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like the middle, like where there's going to have to be empty seats, right? I mean, are they going to be more expensive, these tickets, so that they can make as much money as they were making before with fewer fans?
Yeah, I mean, TBD on the different pricing schemes, and you hate for live sports to become very elitist or any more elitist,
Right,
but I do think that, there may be a nod to sponsors first, who have to do some high-end hospitality in order to justify their sponsorship commitments. Potentially you see something like that with golf tournaments and tennis tournaments. If you think about the fact that hospitality suites are a very controlled environment, so there may be some ways that you can, in a safe and productive way, still be able to host that. But I'm hopeful from an economic standpoint that we don't outprice the common fan in all of this too. We also don't know what the demand will be. So until we start testing some of these scenarios to see if fans will come back, I don't think we're going to be able to
because of the fear of
the fear
COVID?
factor.
Oh, not just because they don't care about sports anymore.
No. I think it will be more the fear factor, and I think it will vary by geography in a huge way. So you probably will see we already have dynamic pricing. You'll see a fair amount of dynamic pricing if you have to, decrease the capacity of the number of people at events. But look at Shanghai, Disneyland opening up in Shanghai, right? at 30% capacity, and the tickets sold out in 3 minutes.
Were they more expensive?
No.
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 Okay. All right. Fascinating. Okay. So for all of us not in sports, but whether we're architects, interior designers, store owners, restaurant owners, movie theater owners, anything that's outside. Do you have maybe some piece of advice for all of us who just have to deal with IRL?
Well, here's my advice, and I guess it's a little bit of some of the concern that I'm seeing, and this isn't really, this isn't my clients, but just what I'm seeing more generally. And I'm going to use a very, very tactical and somewhat parochial example here is high school graduations, right? So if you're on social media, you're seeing somebody somewhere whose kid is not going to be able to have that traditional high school graduation ceremony. And then you're seeing some school administrators and principals get really, really creative in saying, I know this is not what you expected, but we're going to come up with a cool way to celebrate you. And then I'm seeing others where I just think people are exhausted and they're mailing it in. Like literally, we'll mail you your diploma, send us a picture, we'll put together a picture collage, we'll call it a day. We have a client in North Carolina who has come to us to say, we have a really big school campus and we think we can make our own drive-in movie theater here. Can you guys help us build a screen? Can you put together the AV tech? Can you help us with the crowd control, meaning getting the vehicles in and out?
Crowd control. That's interesting. Like you are an expert in crowd control.
We're an expert in crowd control. We do massive events all of the time, all around the world. We know how to mobilize people. We know how to mobilize vehicles. We operate big races. So we know how to shut down streets and bring in volunteers to moderate traffic. So this was, I'm very, very proud of our team because talk about a pivot, and it's small, but it's like a very community driven event of we're going to give these kids a graduation, God damn it. So we're going to build a 100-foot screen. We're going to figure out how to make a drive-in on our campus. And these kids are going to walk across the stage and their parents and their family members are going to be in a car, and we're going to make this work. And those type of things just give me chills because that's not a marketer figuring that out. That's just people, whether it's a school administrator or the parents who said, we're not going to give up. We're going to get creative and we're going to get it done. And I think that's how we all have to revisit IRL. It's not that we can't do it. It's going to be different and we have to be incredibly, and it doesn't have to cost more either. But
did you tell me that like the marathon, like the New York Marathon or something about
we do work with the New York road runners. There hasn't been a decision made on the marathon quite yet.
Okay.
What I might have mentioned to you is that New York City has been the last couple of weekends for anybody in the city starting to close down some city streets to pedestrian traffic. Yeah. And, we're working with Department of Transportation and looking at ways that how can they expand that? How can you mobilize a lot of people to make the best use of the city streets that will now be vehicle free? So the idea is to decrease the density on the sidewalks, open up the streets. And does this now become a lasting legacy of COVID? Are there certain streets in New York City that just can always be vehicle free in the same way that the city hosts summer streets a couple of weekends during the summer and shuts down car traffic? That's kind of cool, right?
So if you're an expert in events, let's just say, and I guess even Marco said this, that the city is going to change in so many ways, Manhattan, so to speak. If you're somebody who is an expert in creating events and mobilizing people and building, you could have other opportunities that aren't necessarily in your purview.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of for all companies, think about the expertise that you have and how can you reapply that expertise in ways that are relevant for what we're living through right now. we have a fabrication facility in North Carolina that makes television sets, but they build things. Right now, they've just gone back to work and they're building the stanchions that you can put sanitizers on, because we know that in the past, there was maybe you needed one sanitizer in an office or in an event. Now you're going to need hundreds of them. So it's really more thinking about what's this post-COVID world look like, and what are the services and the products that we, with our current expertise, can help produce.
Okay. By the way, just people could see this screen, right? About culture class, next one. Okay, good. So two takeaways from that, Christa. Number one, we've been talking about this before Corona. Like, even though your business could be disrupted, and we talked about all these businesses before Corona, not events, mainly more legacy businesses, I always advise my clients to say, okay, it's not about your job, it's more about your skill set.
Yeah. And
it seems like this is a perfect example of like what your skill set is and how can you apply that skill set to the new world. Okay, that's number one takeaway. And number two, all these brands, all these stadiums, all these office buildings are going to put Purell out of business.
We'll see.
Everybody can make their own.
Or invest more in Purell. That's right.
Anyway, thanks for joining, Christa. Before we go on to questions, and anybody could ask a question to me, Christa, or Marco. So just put the person in the text, and I will read these questions. And let me just put this here. Okay, so thank you again for joining. I just wanted to tell everybody that we're going to continue with this free culture class. And our next few Zeit guests is next Wednesday is Charles Renfro, the architect of Diller Scofidio and Renfro. Renfro's for Charles Renfro. And and I think all of us are really interested in how are we going to design spaces of the future? What are those conversations? For those of you who live in New York or have been to New York, Charles and his team are responsible for the High Line amongst many, many, many buildings and structures around the world. Charles, I can't wait to have him teach us. And then Vivian Howard, who is a chef, author, restaurateur, and a TV personality, is going to talk to us about food and, being part of a restaurant and that. And then June 3rd, Kate Beyer, we're going to shift to our brains and talk about mood and the psychobiology, neurology, or all that stuff within the context of what we're experiencing. So that should be really, really interesting. So for the last few minutes, and the last thing is, spread the word. And I also have my premium that you could go on zeitguide.com, and I have small groups that I do this in addition to this free class, and the discount code is Get Smart. All right, I'm not allowed to sell in this culture, but please learn about it if you love it. All right, so here we go. First of all, what school, Christa, is doing this in North Carolina?
Yeah, if I can say it's Cannon High School.
Awesome. All right, so we got that.
In Concord, North Carolina.
All right, great. So here's an interesting one. Does this mean that sponsorship money will increase if there are no fans, especially on the back wall at MLB and sides of NFL?
That sponsorship money will increase, like sponsorships will become more expensive?
Yeah.
It's a great question. I think sponsorships are being very much renegotiated right now, depending on the sports property and the broadcast rights. So if you think about a sponsorship, it's typically, there's the broadcast element of it. There maybe is the in-stadium signage and your ability to do hospitality and some kind of activation. What we're finding in a lot of the sponsorship renegotiations is really everyone having to lean more into the broadcast element of it. this signage has limited inventory, so the valuation of that may not change too much. Good questions. I would say that all of this is very, very fluid across all of the different sports properties.
Okay, and then what aspects of events do you think will be left behind post-corona?
Oh gosh.
By the way, we don't have to answer. We might.
No, and it's a really, I obviously think a lot about this, and I think it's not that certain events are going to be left behind, but the aspects of, I was actually just talking to someone about the Color Factory. If anyone's done the Color Factory experience in New York City, or some of these other pop-ups, where at the end you're jumping into a really big ball pit, or if you've gone to the Museum of Ice Cream and part of that experience is they're jumping into a big vat of sprinkles. I don't know how soon we're going to be comfortable doing something like that until there's new sanitation systems and the visitor or the guest can like physically see the cleaning that's happening. So I'm more concerned that that type of tactical interaction at events may be something that we don't see come back right away. And by right away, I don't know, post-vaccine, hard to say, but I do think that people will be extraordinarily conservative on the tactical things like that.
Okay. One last question from Marco. Somebody said he thinks your mural is beautiful and making the best of a bad situation. But this particular person wonders if Bloomingdale's and other stores boarding over their windows sends a terrible message to begin with. Might one of the suggestions to these stores be to keep the windows open, keep the lights on, and in fact, make new windows every month to keep the street lively and hope alive?
That's interesting. I think that talks more about the economics of it. I know specifically about Bloomingdale's, my contacts there, that they do have employees who go there almost every day to fulfill online orders from the store. I think the boarding up is more about, a worry of looting or having things damaged or lost when less people are around. I don't know. I know the design team there usually puts up new windows, every season, if not every month, and they love doing that. And I know that they don't want as many people congregating in the stores. I feel like it comes down to economics. I mean, I personally love painting the windows there, and I love painting the boards, but I think it's more of a safety and economic reason.
Okay. Well, that's Culture Class for this week. Thank you so much, Marco. Thank you so much, Christa. Thank you so much, everybody, for continuing to join. And come join us next week. I can't wait to hear from Charles. He is a tough job. Unless we have a vaccine, maybe that's what we'll learn from. And like I said, we are in stage 2, the second act, according to my teams and our thinking. And I can't wait to get to the third act, but I think that's in the fall. And like I said, I hope we don't have a sequel. So try to be inspired for the rest of the day. And Christa, thanks for your inspiration. Let's think about our skill set and what we've done before and how can we reconstitute that skill set for the future and the rebuilding of our future. So, and Marco, let's just all keep making art. Thank you.
That's right.
Love you all.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, guys.
Bye.